greatest adventure is what lies ahead. Today and tomorrow are yet to be said.
Hello everyone, No One of Consequence here, back again with a new video. This is episode 33 in a series which recounts my ongoing Dungeons & Dragons campaign, which is on its 9th year. If you enjoy the video, please remember to hit the like button at the end. Start off, spoiler alert, in this video I will be revealing details about this adventure module. And just as a reminder, this is the current composition of the adventuring party. So where we left off last time, the characters had divided their orc allies into 3 different groups, each of which would be led by some of the characters. One thing I forgot to mention last time, you'll see some of those orc icons have a blue dot on them. Those are just to designate the regular orcs, but who have a high morale compared to the others who only have a fair morale. And as discussed in the last video, the character's plan was to lead each of the 3 groups of orcs into the hill giant's great hall from 3 different directions simultaneously and hopefully defeat them. So everyone began moving into position. Here, Obrak, Gorb, Aramis, and Niobe prepared to lead their group through the feasting hall's western doors. And then at the top end of that same picture, Garrett prepared to lead his team of orcs through the kitchen's back door. There in this screenshot, Varys and Renion the elf prepared to attack through the hall's east doors. And then finally, Thorol and Thrato the dwarf assembled their group outside the feasting hall's south doors. So if you remember from last time, the plan was that Thorol would initiate the attack by casting a fireball at the head table. So peering through the southern doors, this is the view that he saw. And just as I mentioned, he targeted a fireball right there at the head table. And of course, as I also said last time, this was the signal for all of the groups to rush into the hall simultaneously. So Thorol's group rushed in right after he cast the fireball and began attacking some ogres seated at a table there. And I was rolling for some of those orcs and rolled a fumble, which you can see there in the chat window. Then over in the left-hand side, you see Aramis, Niobe, and the orc rebel leader all rushed in through the western doors and formed a line there. And Obrak and Gorb were over there as well, but they were blocked off by the other characters. So they, along with some of the orcs, circled around a table so they could push deeper into the room. Then over on the right side of the screenshot, you see Varys and Renion with their orcs have rushed in through the eastern doors. And so at this point, a general melee ensued and chaos erupted everywhere. A few of the hill giants and ogres tried to flee, but most of the monsters in here prepared to fight. Notably, there was a cloud giant who was up here in the upper left-hand corner, but he did not participate in the fight, at least not right now. He merely stood in a corner and watched events unfold. And if you're familiar with the module or have a copy to read, there's a reason why he's not participating. However, the stone giants who were in here did participate in the defense, and they got it from their table and began attacking the orcs on the right-hand side. You can see one's already down. Back at the south end of the hall, the ogres who were seated at that table began fleeing from Thorol's group, and this allowed his so-called Spartans, which is what the characters had begun calling the armored high morale orcs, it allowed his Spartans to move deeper into the hall. Meanwhile, back at the kitchen, Garrett led his team through that door I showed earlier, and they quickly recruited the orc slaves who were working in the kitchen. Then Garrett ran over to attack an ogre cook who began fleeing. But as you can see in the chat window there, he rolled a fumble, and he ended up killing one of his brand new orc allies instead. And seeing this, roughly half of Garrett's orcs immediately ran away, afraid that they were going to get killed too. But the others were impressed by Garrett's ruthlessness and decided to stick around. Meanwhile, that NPC engineer, whose name was Hammond, stood there quietly wondering if he should have just stayed in his prison cell down below. Back in the feasting hall, the attack in the west, pointed out there on the screenshot, it stalled out because those hill giants were proving difficult to defeat, and at one point the orc rebel leader even went down from a hill giant attack, but he was quickly saved by Niobe. She reasoned that if the leader died, then the entire orc force might break and flee. So she cast a healing spell and got the orc leader back on his feet. On the right-hand side, the eastern group, Varus's group, was making some progress, but they also began taking heavy casualties, especially his orc Spartans. And to make matters worse, a hill giant struck and killed Renion the elf. And if you look closely, you can see him where he is, located right there next to Varus. Elsewhere, pointed out here, Obrak and Gorb had made it to the center of the feasting hall, but they were now blocked from going any further by that hill giant there next to the fire pit. And down at the southern end, after an initial quick advance, Thorol's team began encountering heavy resistance from the hill giants you see there. Back to Varus's group. Two of the orc crossbowmen who were assigned to his team jumped up onto a table, and they both fired at the hill giant, which had just killed Renion and who is now attacking Varus. And incredibly enough, you see there in the chat window, and I was rolling for them, both of those orc crossbowmen scored a critical hit, one of which was an instant kill on the hill giant. And all those different results have a different percentage chance of coming up, and that particular one, the instant death headshot, it's only like a 2% chance of coming up, but that orc got it and killed that hill giant. Meanwhile, back in the kitchen, by now Garrett's team had cleared out the kitchen because the ogre and female hill giant cooks who were there chose to run away instead of fight. However, some of the ogres who were stuck at the back of the group couldn't get away fast enough, and a couple of them were cut down, including one by an orc, which you can see that critical hit I rolled there in the chat window. Back in the feasting hall on the east side, Varus's group, his group has taken really heavy casualties, and so Varus decided it was time to take drastic measures to try and stabilize the situation. So he jumped up on that table alongside of his orc crossbowmen and threw a flaming pumpkin seed at the stone giants. And you've seen that in previous videos. It's a Halloween reward item. that the characters can get, and basically it's like a mini fireball. Back in the center of the room, the hill giant chieftain himself had taken a ballista down from the wall behind him and began using it as a crossbow, but I was rolling really badly for him, and he ended up not hitting anyone. Now, by now, Obrak and Gorb had decided to make a dash for the head table, and their plan was to run up under that table and attack the hill giant chieftain from under it. However, what they didn't see initially was hidden in the darkness under the table was the chieftain's pet bear, which immediately attacked when they got within range. And here in the graphics, it's just because of the limitation of the graphics, it looks like the bear and the characters are on top of the table, but actually they're underneath the table. Meanwhile, the hill giant sub-chief came out from behind the head table and attacked some of the orcs, pointed out there on this screenshot. And also the chieftain's wife came around from her side of the table and began attacking Varys' orcs. So seeing that, Varys used another, which was also his last flaming pumpkin seed, and threw it at the chieftain's wife. Back at the center of the room, Obrak and Gorb made quick work of the bear and then continued with their plan to attack the chieftain from underneath the table. He had already been seriously wounded from Thorol's fireball, and now both Obrak and Gorb scored solid hits on him as well, and combined the damage was enough to finish him off. And of course they made jokes about the kind of wounds they inflicted on the chieftain from their vantage point from underneath the table. Since he was out of pumpkin seeds, Varys re-entered melee combat and scored a critical hit on that giant pointed out there, which further helped to stabilize the situation on his side of the feasting hall, and just in time too, because by now all of Varys' orc Spartans were gone, and only the orc lieutenant who was assigned to his group remained. Back on the western side of the feasting hall, Aramis and Niobe were now joined by Garrett and his orcs, and they made additional progress in that area of the room, and he's no longer there. It's not shown in a screenshot, but the cloud giant who was up there eventually just left the hall without ever participating in the battle. And the reason for that is described in the module that the cloud giant is really just an ambassador who is was sent here to see if the cloud giants should make an alliance with the hill giants, and so he personally had no dog in this fight, and seeing that the hill giants were all being killed by these characters and orcs, he decided that it was not in the cloud giants' best interest to make an alliance with these hill giants, and so he just walked out of the room. And of course the orcs who were in his path quickly stepped aside and let him by. So back on the east side of the Great Hall, Varys and the orc lieutenant engaged the chieftain's wife in melee. And then in the south, Thorol's team had pushed further into the room, but they were still facing resistance. So Thorol recast Mirror Image on himself and then engaged in melee combat along with the others in his group. Varys continued his duel with the chieftain's wife, finally scoring a critical hit. You can see there in the chat window, and finally finished her off. Meanwhile, one of the stone giants decided he'd had enough of this whole thing and began fleeing down the hallway, knocking aside any of the orcs that were in his path. and the few hill giants and ogres that remained elsewhere in the hall now began a general flight as well. Here, Garrett, Aramis, and Obrak all surrounded and defeated the hill giant sub-chief, but Gorb, true to form, instead of helping, went to go check the hill giant chieftain's body for any valuables. Back to Varys, continuing his winning streak, he scored another critical hit on one of the stone giants. The characters took down the last of the giants in the Great Hall, and that one stone giant continued running away down that hall to the east. But the characters soon caught up with him and finished him off as well. And that ended the great battle in the Hill Giant Feasting Hall. Alright, well that's all I have for now. Again, if you enjoyed the video, please remember to hit the like button. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to the channel. And feel free to leave comments, share the video anywhere you think others might enjoy it. Anything you can do to help support the channel, I appreciate it. Thanks again. Bye for now.